I won't belabor and delay our timing. So folks will know that if you want to talk like World Cup goss, got to join earlier. So we already did that. I will always be here early if that's what's on the agenda. Okay, cool. All right, great. Got more and more folks joining. Awesome. So I'm going to get us started, and I'm sure we'll have other people join as well. So, hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you all again. We are here for our monthly EAG meeting. This is our Equity Advisory Group meeting. Our topic is on equity in place-based planning. I will talk a little bit about what we are focusing on today and go through our agenda. But before I do that, I'm going to first pass over to, that's me, first pass over to M for our safety moment for today.
Thank you, Ishmael. So today, as Ishmael just said, we're going to be talking about place-based energy planning. And as we'll discuss, one of the biggest drivers in energy planning is grid reliability, keeping the lights on, making any disruptions brief. But one way communities can also participate in energy planning is helping make sure that communities are prepared for when outages can and do happen. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about things like community backup resources and some preparedness. Um, Now, something I did try to do was find a map of resilience centers and like disaster recovery centers and things like that for across our whole service territory. Something I learned is that they're kind of tricky to find. Some areas have them, some don't. So that's something folks can do is try to locate places where backup energy may exist, because there aren't really maps that cover the whole region, but they may cover your part of the region. You can help make sure that you and your neighbors are ready by making sure you know where the nearest backup power might be located. Frequent locations that provide this are hospitals, fire stations, libraries. Check if your neighborhood has a designated resilience hub or cooling or warming centers during outages. Things you can do within your own residence is keep power banks and portable chargers ready and charged. Know your neighbors, have battery powered hand crank radios. And I wanted to include this. I know this isn't as much of an issue in our region, but I learned this the hard way during a tornado scare when I was living in the Midwest. Very important to have something that is not specifically like wire connected that can you can get information through to know what's safe, what's not. And then finally, ways to work together. We'll also be talking today about things like residential battery systems, solar plus storage as growing options, community microgrids that can keep critical services running. And utilities and communities can partner together on resilience planning to really identify and understand what communities really know, which is where vulnerable areas are and where priority restoration might be. What the priority areas might be. So, just wanted to say my concluding thought, energy resilience isn't just about infrastructure, it's about communities working together with their utility to prepare, respond, and recover from outages safely.
Thank you, M. I think that part about sort of the mapping is interesting and sort of difficult to find. So if we're able to, that'd be a good resource if anyone continues to make progress on that. Awesome. So thanks for opening us up for our safety moment, M. I will turn over for our equity moment to Monica. Monica, I will toggle your slides as you asked me to. So thank you for doing this.
Sounds great. Okay, yeah. So today we'll be talking a little bit about community engagement. So I'm going to do this the only way I know how, which is via a story, a personal story. So I'm going to be a little vulnerable today. And hopefully, once we get through that, everyone will still be awake and we can discuss community priorities and kind of pull some, kind of learnings out of that. So I'm hoping that this story can be extrapolated to others, as I'm sure I'm not the only one who has experienced this or segments of this, and then have a discussion around, what community engagement can look like when you look at it holistically. Next slide. So, story time. So, once upon a time, I lived in Los Angeles, in that fairy tale La La Land. And I was in a beautifully diverse area so it was kind of known as a Black Hollywood Hills, right? So it is historically Black neighborhood. To be clear, I was not in the hills. I was in the valley with the normal people, amongst the regulars in a condo. But I loved my neighborhood. It was just wonderfully diverse. It was garden apartments where you had views of lawns and gardens and trees and palm trees. Um, and it was upon that I got a mail. I got something in the mail from Sierra Club, and it said, "Did you know that you were like less than a mile from the last urban oil field in the country? Did you further know that they've had spills and kind of noxious chemicals and all of these things happen on these dates?" And it was just dates going back for decades of all these different kind of, environmental hazards that had happened. And did you further realize that they have no obligation to tell you when these things happen? So just the realization and kind of coming to terms with not just realizing I'm a frontline community member, but a fence line community member. So a person that lives at the forefront of where environmental hazards happen and, that health can be impacted by that. And so, when I was growing up, I definitely watched Captain Planet. I was definitely, in the team recycling. Um, and so I cared about the planet, but it didn't translate to me as a daily or as something that should be of importance, like when it's competing with other priorities. So if it's competing with putting food on the table or childcare or education or having a good paying job, it just didn't rank up there. It just, in the World Cup of priorities, it was going to be knocked out in that first round, is what I'm saying, right? So, and this, of course, is nothing new to a lot of you. So, and to be clear, at that stage in time, I was recently married. I had just had a baby. We were trying to look for, housing in that same area, and just encountering this kind of really brought it to the forefront as a priority. So, next slide. And this is probably not anything new for folks, but this is an article from a while ago, but I love the graphic. Everything from the sad face people to the stats, in terms of how clear it is, not in terms of the message it sends. But one of the big things is race is the most significant predictor of a person living near contaminated air, water, or soil. So not even being low income, race being the most important factor. So next slide. So this is how I went from being a finance bro to a tree hugger. That was my personal inflection point of really moving the environment, kind of like as the general term, clean energy, work in that higher up on my priority list. So next slide. This is a graphic that I stole from R2E2, kindly borrowed from R2E2, which is a assembly of organizations that work within clean energy. But I kind of like an aspect that I think oftentimes we forget when we're working within clean energy, which is it's not about the therms or the kilowatt hours or the IAQ and the COPs and any other kind of acronym you can think of and the NOx. It's really about the benefits, ideally, or the reduction, of risk that can happen. So a couple things that I like about this particular graphic is that it emphasizes those reduction in harms, like the health aspects and affordability. But it also highlights the flip side of it that I always want us to remember, which is that, it can be an opportunity. Whenever there are projects in mind, when we're talking about this clean energy transition, there are projects being considered. It has the opportunity to harm, but also have less harm for our community. But there's also the opportunity for income generating jobs. There's also the opportunity for wealth generation via consultants and contractors in the field, and how much of those opportunities are being reserved for frontline communities, fence line communities, people that look like us here in the room. So three of the ones that really stood out to me from this graphic were, of course, the health aspects, but also having a living wage income. So I think the example that Em and I discussed was that, a person in a community may not care about the environment in general or overall because it's such a esoteric thing sometimes. but do they care that their nephew or niece can get a job as an electrician in this project coming up? That may make a difference. So, next slide. When I think about, projects and community engagement and community impact, when I think about engagement overall, I think about people being interested in what we're saying. And I think the only way we can interest them is if we touch on what their priorities are and are really kind of attuned to that. Once we know their priorities, then kind of, honing in the conversation based on that. So these were just some of the things I brainstormed in terms of like suggestions or things that came to mind in terms of community engagements. But, when we think about why should communities care, it's really the priorities of that particular individual within that community and what makes a difference in their daily life. Um, and then how we tailor that messaging to them. So those benefits and not just the attributes. Obviously, engaging early, having a two-way communication between whoever is owning the project and the impacts of that project, um, and thinking holistically, not just reduction of harms, but also increase of opportunity and impact. But I'm sure there's lots of others. I'm sure there's others that I haven't even covered. That the powers in this room can also contribute, but just wanted to share a little bit about that story, and hopefully that gets the juices flowing in the brain as far as like other things that can also be added.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate you, um, yeah, bringing that vulnerability, like you said, and connecting your personal story to something that, again, is highly relevant for the conversation that we're going to have today. Specifics around the kind of co-benefit and where we might be able to meet community and particularly named communities at as we are undergoing planning for other utility infrastructure, et cetera, and on the community engagement pieces as well, which we'll also talk about and be part of our discussion. So appreciate you for being so relevant on top of it and being willing to share a photo of your daughter and talk a little bit about your life. So I'm sure others appreciated that. I saw the hearts. Um, awesome. Okay. So, in a moment here, we'll move on into our next piece here, which we'll talk a little bit in a moment. But I wanted to just acknowledge as we go through the agenda that firstly, we are holding, this is our June EAG meeting, and want to just recognize at least June is at least over here in sort of Seattle, Washington area, Pride Month. Recognize Juneteenth as being observed at the end of this week. I also learned and saw that it's recognized by the federal government that it's Caribbean American Heritage Month as well. And so there are certainly many other things that are happening and observed in June. And if folks have anything in the chat that they want to highlight, flag, make note of, in particular, if there's anything else that folks can connect to, be able to say, I want to learn more about that or participate in something, please also add that in the chat. We're going to spend our time, as I mentioned, mostly in presentation and discussion around equity and place-based planning, which is what made Monica's opening equity moment so relevant. We've got some presenters here from PSE. We've got Corey, Heather, and Shelby. We've got some other folks supporting as well in the wings, David and others. And so we'll hear from them in a moment. We'll have them give a brief presentation, we'll have a break, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion through to public comment at the end of the meeting. And in a moment, I'll also acknowledge that we've got like a new little segment here that's called News Briefs, which I'll have Ariam touch on here in a moment. Before I transition over to Ariam, I wanted to just acknowledge again, as familiar as we might be with online meetings, just being in shared space together, want to always encourage people to be mindful, just thinking about, I'm here, I'm participating actively, I'm listening, and I'm appreciative of what people are bringing. I'm working with what is being thrown out there constructively, and I'm respecting that sort of EAG member participation is what we're here first and foremost for. As the facilitator, we'll help move things along. I said this a little bit earlier. to make sure that we're making the most of time and how we've planned for it. You'll hear me a little bit more maybe than you have in the past, chime in on some time checks and trying to move some things along if it feels like we're ready to go there. And I also want to ask and just encourage folks um, to the best extent possible that you're able to have cameras on. Highly invite you, encourage you, ask you to do so. If you've got something going on in the background, if you're at home, again, our lives are taking place in and around the computer screen and camera. If you need to step away, by all means, of course, you can go camera off. But as far as sort of active participation, seeing folks being engaged, love for you to have it on. Um, and then finally, we've got folks viewing through the YouTube live stream. And thank you all for tuning in. We've got a member from our facilitation team that is there to help engagement happen over there. So, which is one of the things that was on this slide. And one other thing that I'll just say is for folks, again, viewing on YouTube live stream, member of the public, we will always reserve time at the end of the meeting today at 6:50 for public comment. More instructions will be shared during the break, but ultimately looking to have, if you're interested, first 5 people will have up to 2 minutes each to speak. Okay. So with that, I will turn over. There's got to be like a camera
I know, right?
cut. Yeah. And a little delay perhaps, but I'll turn it over to Ariam for PSE Energy Equity News.
Thanks, Ishmael. Hi, everyone. I'm Arian Ford. I'm really excited to be giving you this little energy equity news update and have a couple of slides to go along with that. Hoping that any questions that you have at the end, we'll kind of open the floor and our PSE team will help field those. But this is primarily for inform level, maybe we'll say. So, this briefing covers two major developments, one being a key milestone in the Integrated Systems Plan, and the second being the launch of PSE's systems-wide equity assessment, also known as the SWEA, which I will be using because it's a very cool word. The ISP team's been working on this with the EAG since September 2024, and that is like on this long-term energy planning. And the team recently completed the initial reference case. The reference case is a modeling baseline used to evaluate different energy scenarios and their associated costs. Initial modeling results indicate that meeting customer demand and state clean energy requirements will require substantial new resources and infrastructure. This includes new generation capacity like wind and solar farms, new and upgraded energy systems, and that includes regional transmission and local lines and substations, and also technologies currently under development, but that might not exist yet, like advanced geothermal. The analysis of potential rate impacts resulting from the required system upgrades, highlighting affordability concerns as rate increases will have disproportionate effects on low-income customers. The analysis is based on multiple assumptions and does not determine final rates or resource acquisition decisions. The 20-year planning horizon is designed to inform near-term decision-making. Of note, the modeling team encountered significant challenges in identifying feasible solutions within the assumptions developed with the RPAG and EAG over the recent months, indicating that further refinement is needed. And then the second topic concerns PSE's organizational approach to equity implementation internally, and that is the SWEA. So PSE is conducting its first system-wide equity assessment, referred to as the SWEA. The assessment will evaluate equity integration across all utility operations. The SWEA differs from program-specific equity initiatives by examining organizational practices across departments, and that includes customer energy programs, financial planning, and procurement. The assessment applies the 4 energy justice tenets as evaluation criteria, and Suzanne Tedrow, Energy Equity Manager at PSE, will lead the SWEA. She's developing a plan for advisory group participation in the assessment process, and the assessment process that you'll be engaged in is designed to identify current equity performance levels and opportunities for improvement across different utility functions. So you will be involved in the SWAYER process, and specifically, PSE is exploring an on-site working session in the fall of this year, 2026, where members would review assessment findings and develop recommendations. And so additional details regarding the SWAYA, the methodology for the SWAYA, and EAG involvement is going to be forthcoming in upcoming months. And that you can have, we're going to open the floor for questions in a second, but just to summarize, the ISP reference case has been completed. It's revealing the scale of infrastructure investment required for clean energy transition and highlighting affordability concerns. And secondly, PSC is launching its first system-wide equity assessment, or SWAYA, to evaluate and improve equity integration across utility operations. So we will now open for questions from members.
And just as we open the floor, mostly this is to try to make sure folks are tracking things that, or we're helping track things that have come up in past meetings or topics that we were at, and we want to know sort of what's the latest on the update. So for some of these, might have preceded some of you, but just as an opportunity to, yeah, check in, ask questions, or if other PSC members have anything that they want to add to help close the loop on some of these, which of course some of these are ongoing. So yeah, I'll give moment for questions, flags, or additions.
And I think we mentioned this at the retreat. This is about keeping tabs on the environment or the ecosystem within which your work is happening. And so, not that any action needs to be maybe taken right now on your behalf, but just taking stock and knowing what's out there so that, as you do your work, it becomes a point of synergy and not missed information. So yeah. Thanks for listening.
Good. Anybody want to add? See, okay. Hearts, thumbs ups. Okay. Of course, as always, just always feel free to jump in into the conversation, unmute. But I do accept, just stay here for a second. I do accept emojis. That's helpful.
I just want, this is Dorian.
Yep.
I'm almost home, but I'm listening. So I missed some of that. Do you mind just briefly giving me a synopsis? I apologize.
Yeah. Aaron, you're muted, but I think, yeah, if you want to just do your synopsis again, that's, yeah, great.
Wrong chat.
I was-
Absolutely. So there's two.
I was saying because I missed a little bit of what you're saying because I'm almost home and I'm in bad reception. Do you mind just giving a brief overview of what you just said?
Absolutely. So there's two things that we wanted to give you an update on. The integrated systems plan reference case is complete. The reference case is a modeling baseline that evaluates different energy scenarios and their associated costs. And so initial models or kind of initial takeaways from that are that raising affordability concerns as we're looking for the reference case for future energy use and projections. And so obviously that's something that the team is thinking about, that the EAG cares about, and as they look to continue looking at that model and understanding things, that is front of mind. The second piece was around the systems-wide equity assessment that PSE is launching organization-wide, led by Suzanne Tedrow. And the EAG is going to be involved with that. Looking forward towards the fall, most likely, with details forthcoming over the next couple of weeks and months.
I love this. This is amazing. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what they're gonna come up with. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. Back to you, Ishmael. I got it in there.
You did get it in there. Dorian, hopefully you caught that, but obviously stay driving and be safe. And if we need any more follow-up, we're happy to do that with you. Okay. So I want to move us here ahead to the focus of today's conversation, which is equity and place-based planning. In a moment, I will have the different presenters introduce themselves. They'll do it as they're getting ready to speak in their different sections. But I wanted to just acknowledge that we've got Corey Corbett, Heather Mulligan, and Shelby Nathan to give us some perspective and introduce this conversation around the sort of place specific sort of strategy and thinking as a utility from large scale infrastructure to things that are more localized and the processes by which we do them. And again, as connected to the conversation that we just had from the equity moment, as they're connected to the way in which we work with named communities. So I want to just acknowledge a couple of things around what we're going to be considering, how we're going to use our time, and what we're going to do with this topic. So firstly, equity and place-based energy planning. We think of this in a couple of ways, 4 ways that really we want to think about it in today's meeting. First is deciding. This is about how the utility decides where to invest in our grid and tailoring approach in named communities. So again, we're going to be talking about scales a lot in this. That infrastructure investments can be or should be pathways to strengthening community, which is a little bit around what Monica was just talking about, sort of decisions about infrastructure in named communities, to the extent that they're meeting clean energy sort of goals, can have broader impacts in the way sort of communities' own resiliency and other priorities. That if we do that, we are literally co-locating benefits that balance utilities' operational needs and regulatory permitting requirements. And I would say a third here is with community priorities where possible. And that the extent to which communities have a sort of participation and are empowered in that are the relationship between sort of energy sovereignty frameworks that exist predominantly within tribal communities that fit within our non-community engagement strategy, which is a little bit, treated a little bit different in the non-tribal named community sense. So today's meeting is this is certainly going to be one where Aaron will do sort of a news update in the future, but we're trying to set a conversation for long-term collaboration. So there isn't anything today that is a regulatory requirement, though likely, and I'll discuss this in a little bit, likely will inform regulatory proceedings, and that's often the way things happen through these EAG meetings. But it is highly connected to PSE's energy equity goals, which are things that we've been talking about a lot and introducing through the retreat. So today, we hope that the long-term collaboration we're establishing is that we're building a better understanding of opportunities and potential outcomes that exist to provide resilience in and develop energy infrastructure. And then over time as well, how we can move towards criteria that moves beyond just technical factors and also needs for communities as we're thinking about reliability and load growth, again, in sort of these like place-based infrastructure investments. So that's how we're going to be spending our time. And I want to just acknowledge again, though not required, these conversations often support regulatory case making for equity approaches and innovative community partnerships. They support hopefully replicable community benefiting infrastructure development and energy planning with alignment across PSE departments. And the sort of nature of what we're trying to accomplish here in a broad sense, as well as in the way you all are participating to deepen community voice and enhance community confidence in these efforts, especially as they are often taking place over a long period of time. So that's our meeting today. I will just do 2 more sort of acknowledgements and making connections. The first of which being to the way in which the EAG thinks about topics. It's a priority action plan or its sort of framework. You'll note that we've looked at this and said, we think there are a couple of really direct intersections here, largely as they relate to affordability and accountability. So in affordability, as we're looking towards the elimination of high energy burden, we're looking towards the cost of energy no longer being a barrier to access essential services. We think that this is a conversation and this long-term collaboration that can support for particularly the conversations that are necessary around what we've called sort of hidden customers, the folks that maybe are not as easily identified through some of the existing interface that the utility has, but who need additional support and access. And accountability, where we can support and advise the utility to build trust, stronger accountability measures, and ultimately provide perspectives on accountability mechanisms that demonstrate how equity is being translated to community benefits. That's a very important relationship and direction that I know the utility spends a lot of time doing. There's often a lot of conversations that we've had around indicators and metrics. Later today, we're going to ask you questions like, how do you know? How do you know it's benefiting community? And so we think that that fits really well within our accountability priority lens. As we go through today's conversation, you should pay attention and say, actually, I think there's other intersections here. And that will be very well received, of course, because that's what we're hoping that you are helping us think about in nuance. The last thing that I will say as far as intersections. So as we have shared before, the utility is currently in a general rate case proceeding. So this is where the utility is working directly with the UTC, Utilities and Transportation Commission, whereby the process will set and approve how the utility wants to direct resources and set customer rates. So we've talked about this often, GRC, general rate case. Currently, the commission is reviewing proposals expected to give their decision, including any approvals or requirements in early 2027. But you'll see how today's discussion, though that's something we'll learn again, full loops and circles being closed, how the discussions today are actually an important part of the energy equity strategy, which is part of the testimony for this rate case. So we'll be able to see some and hear from about some real world examples that reflect those equity priorities in the rate case. And particularly those, again, following our little stars, efforts that deliver meaningful outcomes and impact to customers, things that help to simplify processes for customers to participate in the clean energy transition, and notably examples, deep dive on examples where utility-led investments benefit named communities, which is the whole name of the game for today. So that is how we're going to spend our time. And we'll also acknowledge, as Ariam did as well, that another sort of point of connection is the ongoing work we're doing with the ISP, the Integrated System Plan, which is perhaps right now one of the biggest efforts the utility is working on with long-term implications. So again, today's topic isn't strictly about the ISP, but similarly, the things we're talking about will overlap and make connections with things like generation, transmission, distribution, customer programs, which are all part of the ISP. We'll say this at the end. The next meeting, we'll be inviting the clean energy strategy team folks back talking ISP, just as they were here not too long ago, which is what Ariam was just closing the loop on. So there's many connections. These things are all on purpose, but I think we are hopeful that the EAG will be nuanced as you are often in helping to make these connections and deepen them. Okay. Before I turn over to Corey here, that all sound good? Does that all make sense? Folks feel like clear enough, ready to go? A solid yes, a really affirmative yes. That's great. Okay. So with that, I will introduce firstly Corey Corbett. And Corey, you can introduce yourself a little bit here as you get through your part of the presentation, and then we'll do the same with Heather and Shelby, respectively. So Corey, I'll toggle your slides as you ask me to.
Sounds good. Thanks for the introduction, Ishmael. Hello, my name is Corey Corbett. I'm one of the managers in what we call our system planning organization. So system planning identifies system needs and develops programs and projects to address those needs. And so This is specific to our electric distribution system, our natural gas transmission and distribution system, and then system planning also works on emerging technologies for grid modernization efforts. And my team supports within the system planning organization our benefit cost tool, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It also supports metrics reporting for reliability in named communities, supports regulatory work that occurs in our system planning organization, and then embedding equity within our planning processes. Next slide. So I just wanted to start by recapping some past collaborations the system planning organization has had with the EAG. So between the end of 2022 and the end of 2023, we collaborated with the Equity Advisory Group by providing, I think that first meeting was really just providing a baseline understanding of what our delivery system planning process is. The next meeting we had was really to gather input and collaborate with the EAG on the most appropriate ways to incorporate equity within that delivery system planning process. And specifically, we have a benefit cost tool that we call IDOT, or Investment Decision Optimization Tool, which is specific to infrastructure investments in our planning process. And then at the end of 2023, we recapped how we incorporated the EAG input into our portfolio releases for 2025 and 2026. So typically for infrastructure investments, particularly on the electric side, we plan the work about 3 years in advance of any construction work that occurs. So this graphic is really, kind of a representation of the culmination of the collaboration we had with the EAG, where in the past, a lot of the focus on our investment was around benefit cost analysis, but with input from the EAG, we focused it really on distribution of the benefits and distribution of the investment so that those benefits also occurred in named communities. Next slide. This is maybe the one slide version of, I think in some of those past engagements, there was, maybe 10 to 15 slides, and we went really in depth into our delivery system planning process. But this is kind of the quick summary version of what delivery system planning is. We, on the electric side, have what we call our distribution planning guidelines, which are triggers for both capacity investments and reliability investments. So there's various triggers that would either be for like substation transformers or underground cable around how loaded they are when we may need to study the system to look at a potential upgrade. And also on the reliability side, which is more around outages and preventing outages or reducing outages for customers. There's various metrics we use from those distribution planning guidelines to help inform what types of reliability investments we need to make. On the gas side of things, we use the term integrity management, but really that's a longer term for safety. So there's a number of safety programs that we implement on our gas system that are under the integrity management umbrella. And then we also plan for what we call reliability. So ensuring that our natural gas system on the coldest winter days are able to provide natural gas to customers to keep their house warm, keep their homes or businesses warm. Next slide. After, or actually over the past few years, we've developed some additional tools to help support our planning processes and incorporating equity into those processes. The first tool on the left is what we call our delivery system scorecard. And so that's a screenshot from a Power BI dashboard that we created a couple years ago that allows us to look at both named community data as well as reliability metrics, capacity metrics, and filter by different combinations to look at where we may want to study further, both from an equity standpoint as well as some of those metrics I mentioned around reliability or capacity. The dashboard also actually has a GIS component as well, so we can visually look at the circuits and look at other information overlaid with the dashboard information that's on the Power BI dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, IDOT, that's again, our acronym for Investment Decision Optimization Tool, and that's our benefit cost tool that we use for infrastructure investments. And so, in 2023, we, using input from the EAG, we updated our IDOT tool to incorporate name community information as well as CBIs that we use to ensure we have a targeted investment within named communities across our portfolio of investments. On the left and in the center are some new metrics that in 2026 was the first year we reported for calendar year 2025. And so these are part of a docket referred to as performance-based regulation. So within the full suite of metrics, there's 4 that are related to reliability or outages. The larger image in the center is a heat map that is what we call customers experiencing multiple interruptions. So it's broken out into different color combinations that indicate whether a customer had no outages, between 1 and 4, between 5 and 9, or greater than 9 outages within a given year. And so this is more of a visual image of outages and where they occur and how frequently they occur for some customers. And it's broken out by both all customers as well as named community customers. And so there's, better, larger images that are within that docket. Or, I also would be happy to forward those along as a takeaway from the EAG meeting. On the bottom is one of the new metrics we reported on that's around average and median duration of outages for customers. And so those metrics also were broken out between non-named community customers and named community customers. And one of the maybe perceptions that might be had is that reliability is lower in named communities, but it's actually on par across all of our customers, if not slightly better in named communities. So there are a little bit of nuances between major event days and non-major event days, but generally reliability is pretty consistent across all of our customers. Next slide.
Super quickly, Corey, just acknowledge a question in the chat really briefly.
Sure.
If this has a straightforward sort of response, if not, we can have folks respond through the chat and then come back to it later. Monica asked, is equity a component taken into consideration within the IDOT tool? If so, is there a way to quantify the weight of the equity considerations?
We have kind of traditional benefit cost analysis where we rank or score 12 different benefit categories. So it might be reliability, it might be capacity. There's the tool is really designed to be able to compare different types of investments so that we can fund the optimal portfolio of projects. And the equity piece isn't part of the benefit cost calculation. It's actually, since projects involve specific circuits or locations on the system, we look at how many named community customers would be impacted or benefit from the project, and we capture that within the tool. And so we know, I guess, attribution of that investment of how it will impact or benefit named community customers. And then we also score CBIs in a qualitative way as part of that project specific scoring. So I hope that makes sense, but I think an example would be in our 2020 8 portfolio, which we worked on last year, about 35% or actually 37% of the investment was directed at named communities. And the prior year, it was about 35% of the investment was directed at named communities.
Thanks, Corey. And as we go through this here, folks will start to see again, we'll talk about scales around sort of, I think you've got a slide coming up here in a little bit, Corey, that's sort of like timeline and sequence of process and what happens when and as we get closer and closer to sort of the individual customer where our considerations are. So thanks for flagging that there, Monica.
Sure, and I'll speed up here. I've got just a couple more slides to go. I think this is just an example of a project that planners within the system planning group would scope. So this particular project is a reliability project, and so it converts overhead conductor to underground conductor, which is one of the common reliability upgrades that can occur. Other types of reliability projects might be to convert overhead bare conductor to a special type of covered conductor called tree wire. And then kind of in a couple slides, I talk about our GRACE program and around microgrids, and that's an evolving reliability improvement that we're scoping out through our grid modernization team to help develop that as a standard solution on reliability projects. Next slide. So this particular slide, this is around a new program we've developed in the past couple of years. It's an extension of a conversation we had with the EAG a couple of years ago in 2023 around updating our engagement processes within the planning stage. I think my next slide will illustrate kind of where that fits into the overall project lifecycle. But really, I think this is where we were wanting input from the EAG is on the GRACE program, where I think our planners are really good at identifying where there are needs on the system. But with the GRACE program, it's really trying to collaborate with named communities to get input that are win-wins for both the grid as well as the community. And so I think I'm maybe pressed for time, so I might go to the next slide here to close it out and hand it over to Heather. But this is a simplified graphic of really the project life cycle. And I stole this from my colleague Shelby, who will be talking about where she fits into this process. But what I just talked about is really the early stages of our infrastructure development process. So really that system planning and alternatives considered. So we're really on the front end before work starts and gets constructed. And so I think maybe as you're answering some of the questions later, I just wanted to throw that out to kind of show where what I talked about fits into our overall infrastructure build out our construction process timeline. So I'm good. I'll hand it off to the next speaker.
Thanks, Corey. I think you're good. I think it's important. And you'll see this graphic again as we go through a little bit and make our way from what's sort of on the left to the right, which again gets from the big system planning, like Corey said, to ultimately what is on the ground in like literally figurative ways. So as we move in that direction, sort of in scale, we'll invite Heather to talk about distributed energy resources and the relationship to what Corey was just talking about.
Thanks, Ishmael. So yes, I'm going to take it down a level. But first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Heather Mulligan. I manage our Customer Clean Energy Solutions programs and services. So what does that mean? Basically, my team oversees things like customer interconnected solar programs or residential batteries, transportation electrification, otherwise known as EV products and services, where we're helping to install EV charging infrastructure in communities of various scales. So kind of the whole gamut of things that customers can do to support their clean energy goals outside of the energy efficiency realm, which is part of another team. However, we do work very closely, and some of what I'm going to cover will touch on the work that group is doing. So next slide, please. So first, I'm going to start off by just kind of grounding us all in what we mean when we talk about distributed energy resources. So distributed energy resources are basically smaller in scale and interconnected to the distribution system versus the transmission system. So the big lattice towers that you see going, from say the east side of the mountains to the west side of the mountains, those are transmission lines. But once you get into the community, you start seeing, smaller poles and wires, and that's our distribution system. And so these are projects that can be interconnected to that distribution system, and therefore you're finding them there right in your community. The vast majority of our distributed energy resources are actually located on a customer's property. So they might be on land adjacent to a building, or they might actually be located on that building. And often are what we call behind the meter, meaning that they're serving that customer's load first, and then any excess power is flowing onto the grid. Front of the meter, it basically means that it's in front of a customer meter, and in those cases, it's typically utility-owned resources, and the power is just flowing onto the system for use by everybody. A couple of examples, as you can see here, again, solar on a customer's rooftop. It can be a battery installed at a customer's property. These are usually smaller in scale than the big community batteries that you've seen probably in the news. And it could be as simple as a customer asset that we all have in our homes, which is a thermostat or a water heater or even an EV car charger that can be part of a demand response program to respond to system load peaks, where we can call on that device and ask it to maybe turn down its usage during that demand event so that we don't need to provide as much energy for those resources. Next slide, please. So now that we have a grounding in that, I do want to revisit how the EAG has been instrumental in shaping some of the DER products and services that we have offered. I believe in your last meeting, you actually heard from a member of my team, Mackenzie Martin, regarding the Green Power Solar grants. The EAG has been participating in that process for 5 years now, has really been instrumental in shaping how we design the application process, making it easier and more accessible to more service organizations and others that can apply. The EAG has also been there helping to evaluate those applications and making sure that we're selecting the best grantees possible. Other programs where we've sought and received great feedback from the EAG include our community solar program, where the EAG was again instrumental in helping us to figure out how we could really maximize the benefits from that program for income eligible participants, as well as designing our enhanced incentives for our residential battery program and our demand response and other solar programs. And these are incentives that we offer to qualified organizations serving the community to help them to get those assets at little or no cost, making them again more accessible. And then finally, we've worked with the EAG to receive feedback on our net energy metering program and how it's currently designed, and what considerations we need to keep in mind as we look at designing the next iteration of net metering in the future. And again, making sure that the benefits are equitably distributed across all customers and not just those with the resources to participate. Next slide, please. So again, distributed energy resources are very different than utility scale resources. Utility scale resources, oftentimes are located maybe in our state are often located on the other side of the mountains. That energy is transmitted across lines. You may not ever see those assets, but you might feel it on your pocketbook as we go through this energy transition. Um, DER resources are different because they really are in your community. They might be on the roof of a local church or on the community center or maybe even on City Hall, or they might be on your neighbor's roof. And so there's an opportunity to kind of see those resources and for the community to have more impact on where those resources are being put or how they're being utilized. So they bring that clean energy transition directly to the neighborhoods, as well as providing, I think, local economic and resilience benefits for the community, especially when designed properly. So we can think about, the local installer community and who's putting these projects in place. We think about batteries and how they can be placed to provide that, again, resilience benefit in the case of an outage. Maybe it's a community center with a battery located there to provide a warming center during an outage, or a place where people can go to charge their phones. But it really does give communities more of a stake and a say in how energy is used right there locally. Next slide, please.
Just a quick time check for you, Heather.
Okay.
Just a couple more minutes
Okay.
before we
I'll
transition.
try to
Thanks.
move more quickly. Thank you. I think the point I want to bring across with this slide is just that um, on their own, there are benefits from each of these technologies, but really the true benefit comes when you start to combine them together. And I'll just provide one example, and that's when you combine solar and batteries, that's where you really start to see tremendous benefit, because not only are you getting that clean energy, but now you're able to use that battery to provide resilience, for instance, during an outage. Or we can call on that battery and during a demand response event, like I said before, where we can actually pull energy from that battery that might be sitting there doing nothing 95% of the time, just waiting for an outage to happen. But by participating in our demand response program, the customer receives financial benefit and we receive grid benefits. So it's really a win-win for everybody. Next slide, please. So I want to provide a few quick examples of really what this looks like in a community. So examples can come in the form of, again, projects happening for multiple residential customers in a community. Example of this is the Swinomish tribe installed batteries for their elder housing. So each elder's house or unit has a battery, which provides them, again, resilience, but then that elder also receives the financial benefit of participating in our demand response program and making their battery available for that. Another example, kind of going up the next level, is the Good Cheer Food Bank, where we have both solar and a battery located there. Again, providing resilience for the food bank. If there's an outage, they don't lose as much food. They can continue to operate, but they're also generating clean energy and seeing savings on their bill that they can put back into their core mission. And then finally, there are microgrids that occur at the community level where maybe multiple buildings are seeing the benefits of solar and batteries and vehicle to grid, school buses, for instance. Those are still very nascent in terms of their technological development, but that's a direction we see things moving. Next slide, please. And all of this comes down to what we call energy orchestration. And again, it's really working with communities to determine what are the benefits, the mutual benefits that we can all achieve. How do we make all of this more accessible and beneficial to everybody so that ultimately we have these customer forward experiences that provide both, grid flexibility and resilience, help uplift, provide economic uplift for the community, and downward pressure on rates, bringing greater affordability and value for everyone. Next slide, please. And again, it's, people are doing things now in the distributed energy space, but we really see the opportunity to bring these puzzle pieces together and create a more holistic community-based system. So the question before you all today will be really, how can we coordinate these clean energy investments in named communities in ways that create multiple benefits and position communities to lead? And I think that's it.
Thanks, Heather. Shelby, you're next. I want to say all these things are really important. So be mindful of time, but don't feel pressed to the point that you miss critical points that are relevant for folks to hear. So I'll give you a check if it feels like it's being belabored, but otherwise, yeah, do your thing.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Shelby Nathan and I supervise a group called Project Communications. We directly communicate and engage with customers on PSE projects, primarily new or rebuilt transmission lines, new or rebuilt substations, and our other large complex projects. So really those big projects have a lot of community benefits and opportunities. Unlike my colleagues tonight, I haven't presented here at the EAG and I'm very excited to be here. I have watched a meeting for so please go to the next when you're ready. So this slide is really just to get you cemented in place where we are on the list. So Corey was talking about all that system planning and what goes into finding needs, those opportunities to find where the concerns are on the system. And we are all the way over here at that orange star. So there's a lot that goes into system planning and determines what projects need to be done and which solutions need to be executed. So when it comes to my team, we are joining when they have already decided what needs to be addressed, what needs on the system need to be addressed, both on the gas and electric side. And then what alternatives that would work to address that need, and when they've arrived at a preferred solution. So a preferred solution doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% good to talk about in order to play. It just means that the system planners know what they're going to solve, and they've found it as part of their analysis. So when we get involved, it's going from that planning space into that project delivery space, where they really start looking at design, engineering, permitting, all of those pieces that eventually get you to an actual project that is done. Next. So once a project is ready for delivery and a team is assigned, my team works very early in the process to have an understanding of the community that's going to be served by that. Whatever. We work very closely with our more location-based colleagues who can help us understand the community, what they care about, what those conversations are that are already happening with PSE, those topics, interests, maybe hot button issues, and a general makeup of the community to help us understand and aid our research so that we can actually effectively communicate and engage with the community from starting. We also use public available information to understand if the community is named or vulnerable, what languages are spoken, and then use that to further understand what community, what the most effective ways to work within that community are, and really tailor our plan for the project to educate and inform to the community that we're going to be. So at a more tactical level, we specifically educate and inform on the project need, what we are solving for, the solutions considered, the benefits that that project can bring, using a variety of tools and tactics that are, again, tailored to the audience, knowing that while there are some tactics that might be evergreen and everyone really appreciates, every community is different and needs different tools to help make sure that everyone can participate and understand what's happening. We also in some cases, we also consult and involve on actual siting. So that's new routes for new transmission lines, locations for new substations. Sorry, I lost my place in my notes, which makes it harder for me to talk about things. We are also in continuous communication and information flow to and from the community and the project. So we help the communities understand the project, and we help the project team understand the community and opportunities that might exist in that space as we are constructing it. So we can, and the thing that's really interesting about these is that these are years. So from when the project first launches, that first time the community hears about the project, all the way to the very last pool potentially being installed. It could be years in duration, sometimes a decade plus. So what's interesting to think about my team is that we are fundamentally different from other communications and engagement teams because we are primarily focused on the projects. So while we're obviously grounded and understand various other aspects of the company and the ecosystem in which we're working, we don't operate in the vacuum, no one does. We recognize that what we want to talk about project and what it means for the community isn't always the most pressing for the community in relation to the company. So we kind of take a one PSE approach, knowing that we often act as a funnel to get folks information about the products, the services, the questions they have from other areas of the business, and then back to them as a part of this project as well. So I think that I had mentioned before is we are really looking at all of these projects as an individual and tailoring our what we are doing, how we're communicating to the community that we are serving in this. But we also look at how it fits into the whole and understanding that our customers need the same level of information and to be engaged with in similar ways to make sure that everyone can participate in the conversations about these reliability projects. So we consider community interests, concerns, potential barriers to participation and understanding when we are determining the best ways to engage. I think too, one thing that's most exciting about this team and engaging on projects in particular is that over the last few years, that the area around public engagement and best practices has really improved. And my team has been doing a great job at keeping up to date and understanding where those best practices are, what's effective, looking back at other engagements, and then using those lessons learned to be more effective as we move forward. So our goal is always that our customers have the information they need about the projects and opportunity to participate if they desire to do so. So tonight I wanted to highlight a few projects that we've done over the years, some that you may be familiar with and some that you might be. These are just a kind of a smattering of some of the larger examples of actual engagements, citing or large engagements that we've done over the years. So calling attention to Pierce 230, that second one over, we were citing a new 230 kilovolt transmission line. And we had a community siting advisory group to help us determine the route for that new transmission line. It was a part of a broader project which constructed about 8 miles of new transmission line in the Pierce County area. It was completed in 2017. That was for Sumner, Bonnie Lake, Fording, and just central Pierce County customers. Another one that I find really interesting is somewhat similar in terms of the style was the Bainbridge Solutions. That's that Merton Cove Winslow 115 kV. So what's interesting about that is that too was a package of projects that all work together to provide more reliable power to the community. And what we did there was we formed what we called the Community Sound. That was a group made up of members of the community from various interests, different areas, to then kind of inform PSE on their feelings around different aspects and criteria around transmission lines. So we started with route segments, little pieces, create an actual route all the way to routes. And then ultimately a preferred route with that group as well as with the broader community. And that one actually took place during COVID, which meant that we had to pivot really out of our normal in-person engagements. And that really kicked off, I would say, our online and hybrid opportunities for engagement, which at the time was very different and new, but what really changed the way we think about going to our customers and meeting our customers with the tools that are actually helpful for them where they are. Not everyone can go to a public meeting at a local community hall. Not everyone is interested in spending time online going through things. So really trying to understand all of the different audiences and what is effective to reach them. The last one that I was going to highlight tonight is just some microgrids that we have done, similar but different to others. We had done a demonstration with Glacier Community to install a battery to support downtown business in case of outages. We recently did one in 2023 in the Sandwich Island area to work with the fire department and local residents. Excuse me, to provide power to the fire department so that it can function when the power is out. And then two that are just currently in flight that we are currently still engaging with the community and communicating on is in Dakota and Tenino, which are more rural communities in Thurston County. In Tenino, we are looking at installing a battery at this PSE substation and a solar array on adjacent land, as well as partnering with, backfeeding the school, which is their emergency shelter. And then also a small battery in Lakota that would store power and then release power for, I want to say about 200 folks when power is out. It's a big aggregate, very long reliability was so I just want to thank you for the opportunity. That was a lot of information very quickly, and I did see some questions. I'll do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shelby. So a couple of things just want to acknowledge. So what we'll do is this. We've got some questions in the chat, and I saw Elizabeth said this can be followed up as well. So if there are some direct responses from folks at PSC, you can add those into the chat. I'm gonna invite folks for a little break just to like get some water and be hydrated and go like chew on a fruit or something. Just quick 5 minutes, back at 6:15. We're going to then go into discussion for the rest of the period, and we're going to blend that with questions you might have for the presenters. They're not going anywhere. So let's just do a quick break if there's quick responses in the chat, but just try to be back 6:15, 6:16, and we'll get started again and do all the things. Okay. Okay, we'll start to come back. If you're still wrapping up with something, that's okay. I'm gonna do one quick acknowledgement about public comment before we move on. So if you can hear my voice, begin to come back, finish what you're doing. I wanted to just make mention, of course, as I said earlier, by the end of this meeting, aiming for 6:50, we will I'll look to our team to see if anyone has signed up and indicated that they'd like to present public comment or join for public comment. You can do so through the live stream channels or contacting us directly. What you will do at that point, if we have seen your request, is we'll have you join the meeting using the meeting information. This will get included in the YouTube live stream as well. And we will monitor folks so that the first 5 people are who get entered into the meeting for public comment up to 2 minutes per person. So that's that. The other thing I'll say before I move forward, I'll give people permission to feel free as like I'm trying to move things around, that if something doesn't work for you, I welcome that area. I'll make a point. We have a back sort of chat, and M didn't like chew fruit. She didn't like go chew on a fruit. So
No, I loved it.
oh, you loved it.
I
Oh,
loved it.
oh, all right. Yeah, you could tell me what you love too. That's good too. Just chew on a fruit from time to time. I need to do that more. Okay. So we have the remainder of our time to open up the floor for discussion and a mix of just basically our conversation. So we have a couple of questions, or a handful of questions, I should say, that we will add into the chat here in a moment. I'm going to read them here briefly so you can have them top of mind. We're also going to use Mentimeter as a way for people to provide sort of written response. Throughout the conversation period, though, again, feel free to come off mute, ask questions. Is there things from the presentations that you just heard that are like really percolating or perked something in you that you wanted to discuss or dive in deeper? Those are all on the table for the remainder of our time. And again, just a recognition as we are thinking about how we're spending our time today or what value it has. We're thinking about long-term collaboration, and so getting brief overview on the sort of system planning, transmission to the more localized distribution to the more on-the-ground project delivery is sort of the point of what we're doing today. So I do see Rachel's hand if we want to start there, and then we'll get the questions going here. But yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of topic is something that I could probably talk about for hours, but I just wanted, in response to the first question, an example I can think of is the Port Campbell Scullum Tribe Clinic has a solar and battery energy storage system that we recently put in. And I think I've voiced these in some capacity to other PSE employees in the past, but when I looked into the potential benefits of using that battery for like a flex program or relieving burden to the grid. I know PSE doesn't yet have a program that addresses that. So the programs in existence currently are more geared towards residential. So curious to see what that will look like in the future. And then in regards to the GRACE program, I think that was first introduced to the tribe by Catherine Romero, who came and spoke to our council, and I've had a couple meetings with PSC staff about it. And even now, after meeting a couple times and seeing presentations and emailing back and forth, I still don't fully understand what that program, the intent of the program, or what it looks like in actuality. And I mean, my own that I work for's concerns aside, I think that as PSC is rolling out programs and thinking about ways to communicate with community, obviously early engagement, often engagement is very important, but also having at least some clarity in terms of what the deliverable might be on PSC's end and what the community or customer, etc., might expect could be helpful. I've been in communication back and forth, I think, for like maybe a year at this point. So I'm happy to follow up offline about the specifics of that, but just as a general note, I think there's a balance between approaching the community early and also like being prepared enough that you're able to address some of those initial questions.
Thank you, Rachel, for just diving right in. So what we'll do here is I'm going to change the screen. While I change the screen, we can have the conversation continuing on. Ariam is added into the chat. But while the conversation is happening, would love folks to use the Mentimeter link. It is a link that is in the chat if you're on your computer or on your sort of phone device. And what it'll allow you to do is provide responses directly to the questions that are being asked while and we can see those in front of us. So that'll be a way for us to just have different forms of participation for the questions that we've got. So that first one is if you can give an example of infrastructure project that created co-benefit like the ones that presenters described. We've got solar battery storage systems, Skolem Clinic, as Rachel was just talking, helps relieve residential energy burden. Wild Tours facility has huge co-benefits for students at Central Washington University. Many of the students in geography have summer interned there, gain valuable job school skills, and take field trips there with classes. So we'll continue to encourage folks to please write responses in the chat, into the Mentimeter for each of these questions. But if someone has a reaction and wants to speak aloud, please do that as well, and we can track your comments into the Mentimeter.
I have some exposure with the Swinomish cottage and elders housing. That has been very helpful. We've had a power outage, and during that time period, our elders were able to maintain their medical devices that were working because of the backup grid. So I think that's really important. I like to see that the named communities do have some kind of infrastructure so that if there is emergencies like that, the community members have access to electricity for communication, but more importantly for like the medical essentials that sometimes we forget about.
Rachel, do you have your hand up?
No, that was from earlier, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to track that. Thanks.
From what you're hearing from each other or examples you provided or what the presenters shared, are there specifics that folks like really want to elevate around why it's worked well or why you've seen it be successful or what specifically has stood out as a positive example of sort of co-benefit infrastructure?
I guess I just want to kind of echo what the presenter said earlier about the benefit of having this thing is just like not only when you do this, you are directly impacting, or I would say benefiting people that are saving on those money, and they can spend that savings into other things that they need, whether that is like at a residential complex or this is a business. It's like the benefit can just have like a multiple ripple effects all at once. So I think that that really resonated with me, and I would love to see more of those kind of community investment in the areas that we have some of our most impacted named communities.
I
I'm happy to talk at length about the Wild Horse facility if you want. I won't talk at length,
How about
but
the brief? Yeah, but
yeah.
say a little bit more. Yeah, go for it.
So it's mainly a wind facility. If you haven't been over to the Kittitas Valley, you can't miss it. It's, up on the big hillside. Mostly wind, a little bit of solar up there too, but it's really, really great. Every spring, I get an email from Andrea Crawford, who runs the summer internship program. And she usually hires multiple of our students, and it's so great because it's a paid internship, and those are really hard to come by. And this is oftentimes maybe the first job that a student has had. They are tour guides. They're trained as tour guides. They're giving the tours. You can stop up to the facility with your family, do a tour. You're likely getting that tour from one of my students. It helps teach speaking skills, which are just super, super important. I have seen some of my shyest students get jobs up there, and by the time they're done with their 6-month internship, they are just a completely different person because they've had to speak so much about energy, about these projects up here. I also really like taking my field trips up there because there's a lot that goes on with land restoration, right? All of the land that was disturbed to put in those windmills that has then had to be, rehabilitated in some other location. There's so many different animals and endangered plants, little cacti that live up there. So I take my biogeography class there. I take my energy class there, and it's just a great place. They have a great meeting room where you can host events and things like that. So I can't say enough good things about Andrea and about that facility and what it's done for my students.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, thank you for elaborating. Dorian wrote in the chat that they would love to do a tour.
Yeah, I know. I think we'd been talking at some point of having one of our events over here at the facility because it's just, yeah, it's really impressive. There's an amazing view of Mount Rainier when you're up at the facility. So it's really great.
Thanks, Megan. I see Glenda's hand, and then we'll prompt to the next question as things keep percolating.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the ask. It's like what made it work well. And I see a lot of these are organizations or tribes that already has structures in place where it's easier to engage with the organization or the community because they have people whose main job is to engage. But I'm just wondering about other communities who might not have that structure. I'm just reflecting back on my engagement with the community solar program. A lot of the organizations that submitted, a lot of them are bigger organizations, or there were solar companies that approached these organizations that co-wrote or like gave a lot of examples of how solar panel could improve their facility or what benefits that they can get. So I guess is to reiterate, like community engagement also includes like, outreaching to the smaller organizations, but also capacity building, right? Working with them to go through the entire process. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that too.
Thank you, Glenda. That's there's a question that's coming up, so I'm gonna say this now, but I'll say it then when it comes up as well, because we've talked about community engagement and sort of going all the way to the start of this meeting when Monica sort of kicked us off, and there has been a couple of instances in these conversations where we're talking about not, the early and often is important, but also just sort of recognizing existing priorities, but the point around capacity and the question that we had today is the question that we had today early on to recognize that one of the objectives for the conversation is that sort of infrastructure investments can build community capacity. And I think we'd like to think about that both from like a resilience way in which Heather talked about sort of adverse needing for backup, but also in sort of the like organized sort of community infrastructure way as well, which is kind of goes back to M's safety moment around sort of the resilience networks that we have and how we work together. So I think those are important ways to think about sort of, as it'll come up, evolution around engagement and what we're trying to do when we're actually interfacing within communities. So all great points. I didn't add anything other than making the connections from what folks have already said. Earlier, I asked sort of this question, and someone asked also around sort of like equity considerations and how those are quantified, et cetera. How will we know if place-based investments create positive outcomes for community? What are the signs? Whether that's something really physical, tangible, or some of this more social, cultural that we're also talking about. So again, please feel free. You can speak aloud. You can use the chat. If you use the Menti, we'll all be able to see it if that's a way that you want to share your thoughts. So, Ba, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, because I heard about job creation, right? And that matters a lot. But like the way we can measure this like a positive outcomes is how impactful or like how many jobs are we creating for those named communities. I think that's a useful metric to say these are a specific group of people that benefited from this. So I think that's a one metric that we can know if it's providing a positive outcome, I would say. Thanks.
Okay. So job creation. Go ahead, Christine. I'm gonna
Yeah, for named communities, not just job creation in the community in general, but for named communities, like how many named community members are benefiting from that job creation intentionally.
I also think resilience. Resilience is I think is really big, especially if you are in a rural community. So I live in a rural community, and um, if the power goes out, there's not very many resources. I can't just run to the store down the street. And then once again, if there is a larger impact, how many communities can replace the things that they lost due to the lack of energy? You know, I live in a tribal community, and a lot of our community members have fish and different things, hunting and gathering that they do throughout the year to supplement their diet because of the cost and just for cultural relevance. So if they do lose their energy and lose their uh, aren't able to keep their stuff cold, that is a huge impact, not just financially, but also culturally as well. So I think that's resilience is a big component, I think, that we need to think about as well.
I just want to echo what you shared. Um, I think something that's interesting in what you said, we know Heather talked a little bit about resiliency earlier, and again, a little bit in the way that M talked about it. So we're making sort of these threads. But something that you said, I'm underscoring this. It sort of stood out to me. You talked about sort of replacing what has been lost. And so resiliency, you always talk about like, is it a way to bounce back? And there's a way to sort of like, no pun, but like weather the adverse event and see sort of where you end up on the other side. But I think it's really interesting and try to think about how do we evaluate or assess the ability for a community to ultimately come back to a place of stability or ultimately, even better thriving than where they started from. And that is a huge thing to recognize and give credit to, the extent to which our broader system-wide but local infrastructure is supportive to us to do that. Cool. Okay, so I want to just acknowledge a couple things that are being shared here on Menti. So people are saying that the benefits stay in the community, job creation and skills training for community members, communities celebrating the investment, they're talking about it, they want to engage more, they want to be part of future projects. How many named community apprentices were used on projects, how much they went to other job sites, did jobs increase the ability to stop generational poverty, community ownership of projects. Yes, yelling. So kind of going back to the engagement at town halls, the better. I think it's unavoidable, but doing this in collaboration and not to a community is the way to go. Charging stations during power outages for those who rely on medical equipment or backup power for homes with no generator structure that create resilience. Community members notice the improvement can be consistency in service, significantly fewer outages, lower financial burden on each household, and more services added accessible to members. And I'm thinking back to, again, Monica's equity moment in one of the last graphs you had sort of these, you talked a lot about sort of workforce, Monica, but also sort of public health, and other sort of promotions. So I think I want to just, yeah, call attention to those if we're not saying them here. Okay. So where's my little arrow go? So continuing to think about some of these prompts and this sort of again came up a little bit earlier. So when we're balancing community benefit, talked about sort of these threefold: utility operations and regulatory requirements, what equity principles should be front of. So earlier on, we talked about when the objectives for this meeting, that we think and we hope that infrastructure sort of investment can or has often been mostly in the like two parts of the triangle of utility operations and regulatory requirements. How can equity principles help us to better balance to community needs as well? I'm wondering if we need a little nudge. I'm wondering if any of the presenters, as you've been hearing and thinking about what folks are saying and going back to the presentation that you had, either the presenters or other folks from PSE, yeah, just also your reflections on this, if it might help the group as well.
I'm happy to be a proxy for one of our members who was unable to be here today, Aksa. And she sent some thoughts, and for this particular topic said that utility operations, regulatory requirements, and community benefits are intended to serve and benefit customers and communities at the end of the day. Often the approach that is taken can differ, but the goal of these processes is to provide tangible benefits and positive outcomes for communities. Given differences in approach at times, it is important to bear in mind the overarching goal for utility operations and regulatory requirements should be to create or improve positive outcomes, economic, social, environmental, financial, etc., for communities, named communities in particular, and that all four elements of energy justice are accounted for. Yeah, that's the paraphrase of it.
So also, I don't know if what I put in the chat goes in there too. So so I'm not quite sure how to do this on phone, but I just right should be an equity, the things that we're trying to do, because if named community cannot rely on vision, then it will even even more, I guess. So I would throw that.
But you're chopping up a little bit. We did see what you wrote in the chat about reliability as the forefront, and your audio was a little bit cut in and out there. But we did see what was in the chat. Yeah, you might have some connectivity issues, fortunately. Yeah, okay. No, you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure if you want to use the chat, if you're having connectivity issues, please feel free to do so. I'm curious, PSC folks, just as you think about these sort of three legs of the stool, thoughts on your mind that sort of, even if they're not all the way well-formed, musings around how you're thinking about the connection between or among the three of these?
I guess I'll jump in and just say I saw something about reliability just show up and that should be at the forefront. And so for me, it kind of I don't disagree. I'm just saying that I think one of the balances we often have is around where do you put the emphasis? Is it reliability? Is it cost? Is it um, distribution of benefits? And so I'd be curious if that sparks any thoughts for anybody about just when you have multiple priorities, kind of nothing is the priority. So how do you take different things and then decide what should lead?
I could say in our community, it is definitely going to be is it affordable? We have recently done a survey, and it's a very, very high percentage of folks that are reliant on the energy systems of the LIHEAP programs. However, when we really think about it, if we can collaborate with other organizations to start cracking away at the root causes, um, lack of weatherization, um, if there's infrastructure inefficiencies, if we start thinking about those things, we might be able to alleviate some of the root causes that contribute to this energy burden. So energy, um, I think the energy burden is a huge driver. However, I think we also need to take a multi-pronged approach and see if we can start shoring up some of those inefficiencies in the grid or in the infrastructure of the community.
Yeah, I do. I think that this question, to a little bit to Heather's point around sort of prioritizing is what's on my mind. And just as you were just speaking there, Christina, um, you're ultimately talking about things that are quite upstream, and I think it's really relevant. I was thinking about Corey's presentation from earlier, and Monica's question that sort of came in around, you asked explicitly, Monica, what are the equity considerations and sort of that cost benefit analysis, which is quite upstream, and the ways in which we have to work with what the sort of conditions are, but be able to try to continue to be relatively progressive in our thinking and creative in our thinking, because there's the opportunities that happen sort of upstream in that timeline or sequence, and then there's what we sort of have the opportunity to really influence in what, let's say, Shelby was talking about, but recognizing that that's really at project delivery. And so I think what you were just recognizing, Christina, starts to see us in that direction more upstream. But I know that it's complex. And perhaps if folks are like, there's still more about this and I'm really interested to figure out how we can make the connection of these three, also flag that so we can spend more time on something like this in the future. And I'll also acknowledge, Dorian, I know you put in the chat, you said summarizing is very difficult. If you're struggling, just like come off mute and say what you got to say, and we'll do the work of summarizing as we package together notes and things like that. Okay. This came up a little bit earlier. So this is what I was sort of holding on from Glenda's point. So this question is the next evolution of engagement around place-based investment in communities. I think Glenda's response a couple of questions ago is sort of really perfect here. And that we want to see perhaps the evolution of engagement move in a direction that is not only about some of that transparency and information and participation in process, but really a activity that increases community capacity, community leadership, sort of empowerment of community to be able to be autonomous in some of its own planning and its own sort of voice that it has. So, and again, this was Monica's first sort of question as we had the equity moment. So as you've been hearing what's happened, and again, PSE folks, if you've got thoughts or if you've got reflections, happy to hear them as well. Next evolution of engagement around place-based investments thinking about that transmission, distribution, delivery. What hasn't been said or what haven't we acknowledged as we think about the idea of like co-benefit and going back to one of the early objectives that sort of infrastructure investments should increase community capacity. What is that? And you shared a couple of examples when we started our first question here. And so I think some of you have hit on a really good, sort of interesting, nuanced space around the involvement of named communities, particular, and what some of those co-benefits are. And I'm curious about not just the outcomes of projects, not just the performance of infrastructure, but the process by which they come to be. What sort of level of co-benefit can come from the process as well as the performance, so to speak, of infrastructure investment?
If you mind a PSE voice, I have a thought. As we were, talking a little bit about this question, I was thinking back to all the way at the beginning with Corey and Heather, and I know all of the other pieces. Maybe it's because I like engagement and communication, so I look at it through that lens. I saw dozens of opportunities and options for folks to potentially engage and inform different pieces of the puzzle because it is so complex. So as you were asking these questions, like, oh gosh, Corey mentioned this piece and this piece. And because there is so many pieces, there are so many potential opportunities. Really upstream in that process as well, down below as we get to practice.
So folks are saying, so early involve the ground leaders, more grassroots, engaging with coalitions of environmentally justice-focused organizations, resilience hub, faith-based organizations, community-based orgs, asking communities what their needs are, what could help, ask where any red lines are, help understand what projects are unacceptable or which land is off limits, such as traditional land. CBOs and other local partners, they have a better temp on what the community needs or facilitate engagement. Build the capacity and partnership with local orgs to access community solars or distributed energy resources. Make information needed for decision making more accessible. Thinking about engaging those who care more about the economic benefits of named communities than equity burdens. You're non-political, also engaging community members who are not involved in grassroots. Demonstrate clearly what benefits are. Money talks. I think something that came up in the last response, or when we said, what are the signs? And someone said like enthusiasm, seeing enthusiasm for processes and seeing enthusiasm from community for what these kinds of investments can do. I won't go into a big tangent, but we're supporting another project right now that's called sort of low pollution, and it's means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And for folks that have experiences in sort of, as Monica was saying, proximity to like really tragic, harmful environmental conditions, that means one thing around what that is for them. And folks who have had some more access and how they mitigate for that, it means something else. But when you boil it down, a lot of that can, exactly what Monica was saying earlier, can come down to, as much of it's the sort of for our health and the environment, but it's also like the ability to feel like safer in raising a family, or the ability to feel like you have the choice for sort of a healthy lifestyle, or the ability for you to have confidence in the sort of local community development that's happening nearby. And so there's ways to be thinking about our engagement as a tied to like community capacity. And I thought it was interesting when someone talked about those who are not grassroots, who might not be actually close to some of the topics in that way, but might be an opportunity to build broader coalitions than we might always think about. Okay. Last thing, I'll just sort of pose this, and if folks have response, we can take it, but otherwise I'll start to wrap it down and make some time here for public comment as we close. So ultimately, we're hopeful that we are setting some groundwork for a long-term sort of collaboration. And if today feels like we're any closer to any of the EAG priorities and actions. And so I will first ask Ariam if we have anyone for public comment. And if not, or if we do, folks can respond to this in the chat. If not, we can sit with this for a little bit before we come to a close in a little bit.
We do not have anyone in line, but we have posted in the YouTube the instructions. So here's Sophie.
So what feels like we are closer out of what we learned from our presenters today and heard from our peers to moving forward? And what feels like maybe is still on our mind that we're like, I still am seeking to understand this or that. And I'm leaving today with questions, which is also okay. Okay.
I'm not sure I've ever heard this group quiet for that long before.
Yeah. I'm also like, I'm sitting here, I'm a person, I'm sweating right now. So it might be just like a warm day and a long day, and that's also okay. So I'm gonna pull that off the screen and just sort of give a final moment of reflection. Anything, open the floor. If there's anything on folks' mind, appreciation for anything for today, anything lingering, and if not, we will bring to a close again, assuming that we don't have any other public comment. Yeah, for sure.
Is it really hot over there? Yeah.
It was 93 degrees at my house this afternoon again.
Oh, that's crazy. I haven't been outside since like 8 a.m. So I don't know what it is over here. I know it's hot, but we're more used to it than y'all.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I just want to say that I feel like it's really great to hear these talks where people come back and say, hey, look, based on this past conversation with EAG, these are the changes we've made, and this is how we're doing it differently as we're moving forward. I don't know. I feel like you've taken our notes on a lot of things on these topics. And so maybe that's why people don't have as much to say here, but yeah, I just really, really enjoy hearing kind of closing that loop, right? And hearing how our feedback is being incorporated and how it's actually changing, I don't know, some of the diagrams you're making and some of the things you're showing and things you're doing. It's just, it feels really rewarding.
Cool. That's great to hear, Megan. Okay. Final words, PSE side.
So I would just want to come on camera here and and say that I really appreciated this conversation. Uh, appreciate my colleagues showing up at this late time to present to the team and engage with them. Uh, I just I just want to highlight a couple of things that might have been missed in some of the latter part of the feedback on the mentee. Um, Megan talked about the relationship that the PSE folks at Wild Horse have with the community. Shelby talked about one of the first steps when her team's working on a project is to contact the local PSE staff who have relationships and connections in the community and sort of understand what's happening there. You've heard from the outreach team that has taken a major focus on engaging with named communities across our service territory. Um, so there are a lot of background things that sort of helps answer some of the questions, and sometimes um, Shelby also talked about the fact that we try to show up as one PSE. Um, Sometimes in these conversations, because we try so hard to create balance between what the team is providing and what feedback they need, that we don't always step back and say, here's the foundation on which all of that is operating in. So I just wanted to highlight those areas where that did show up, and thank you all for a wonderful and engaging conversation. And yes, it is very warm. My office is in the attic here, and while the rest of the house is air conditioned, my office is not. So here I am. And Megan, yes, we are babies over here when it comes to the heat. So thank you all, and nice job, team.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, safety movement. Hydrate, stay cool, chew on a fruit, do what you need to do.